welcome. It is so nice to have you at Hillside, and thank you for being patient with us this morning. What I would ask is if you silence your cell phones, just so that as we have our panel discussion, we don't have unusual interruptions. My name is Emily Acker, and I serve as CEO at Hillside. I'm really grateful that you came to campus this morning or are attending via Zoom to hear this very important discussion. One of the things that is quite true is that loneliness is not simply being alone, it is feeling unseen, misunderstood, or disconnected. I think we have all felt like that during times in our lives, and today our adolescents, our children, and even those of us who are in the sandwich generation, taking care of both children and parents, can feel isolation and loneliness as well. Hillside provides mental health services to children and adolescents and their families through residential treatment, day treatment, virtual, intensive outpatient treatment, and intensive in-home services. So we have an array of services to help families and kids manage their mental health, and we're really happy to have you join us here today. I am going to now introduce our moderator for the discussion today. Paige Rowe is the founder of Rowe Consulting, a nonprofit strategy and public relations consultancy. Paige is a parent, an advocate, and a longtime friend of Hillside. She brings a thoughtful perspective on connection, community, and supporting families. Thank you, Paige, for moderating this important conversation. Next, we've got Laura Tapscott on the panel. Laura is Hillside's own individual and family therapist. We are very proud to share her with you today because she is such an expert, and we are really proud of her. Next, we have Ashley Owen Smith. Ashley is a behavioral scientist focused on mental health, trauma, and community-centered approaches to well-being. Beside of her, we have got Jada Kelly. Jada is a youth leader at Fox ATL, recent high school honors graduate, and incoming Howard University student. Congratulations. And so she brings that student perspective, young person perspective to this conversation. So thank you for being here. And next, Leslie Poole. Leslie is the Associate Director of the Caregiver Pillar at the Carter Center's Rosalind Carter Mental Health and Caregiving Program. That's a mouthful, and your job is huge. So we appreciate you taking time to be with us today. So again, welcome, and I'm turning it over to Paige.
Thank you, Emily, and thank you all for being here. And again, thank you for being patient while we figure out some of our technical challenges. Thank you to the panelists for joining us today. Well, we have such an important discussion to share with you, and it's so pleasing to me to see how many of you also feel that loneliness as an epidemic is a type of worth our time consideration today. Emily set things up very well for you by defining loneliness for you. I wanted to give you a little bit of a sense of the scope and why it's so important to our mental health currently and the mental health of our youth and what that means for their future and their development in general. So I am reading from my phone because I've got all my notes on there. It's just how I roll, so please forgive me for that. But what's very interesting is there are sort of two different worlds going on. We have the older generation where the physical and mental health impacts of loneliness are really well studied and known. We know that in 2023, Dr. Vivek Murthy, the current Surgeon General at the time, issued an advisory that loneliness was a public health epidemic. And he identified several key health impacts. It increases mortality risk, with the risk of premature death increasing by nearly 30%. cardiovascular risk, such as heart disease and stroke, by about 30%, 29 and 32% respectively. It also increases the risk of depression, anxiety, and dementia, immune function as well. And we also saw that adults were experiencing loneliness even before the COVID-19 pandemic. So we can't blame all of this on the COVID-19 pandemic. With the younger generation, what we see is a paradox. We often think of them as the most digitally connected, always attached to their phones, always texting, always responding, always, is it Snapchatting now, or there's something else? Jay, that Google is in it. We did talk about this at our last panel discussion on social media and parenting, but I have forgotten. I think they all changed so quickly. But 80% of Generation Z respondents in a global study reported feeling lonely in the past 12 months. This is in contrast to 45% of baby boomers. And this is actually against what we would typically see in the progression of mental health and well-being over time. You usually think you tend to be happier, and as we get older, we used to see higher rates of mental health concerns. So that is very concerning, because we know that 61% of young people, according to Harvard Graduate School of Education, ages 18 to 25, experience profound loneliness. 35% of you say it disrupts their daily life. And only 1 in 4 young men under 35 repeat feeling lonely. 1 in 4 young men under 35 report feeling lonely on a daily basis. So what we're going to talk a little bit about today is that loneliness is pervasive. What does it look like? What are practical strategies that we can use to help identify it in ourselves and in our family members? And how do we as a community help address loneliness as an epidemic? And that's what our fantastic panel is here today to discuss. So what I want to start with in this conversation is, when we think about young people today, obviously they have a different sense of connectedness. In our last panel on social media, we did talk about how friends in real life and friends online can be perceived as sexually valued to be cool. So I wanted to ask all the panelists, what's different about achieving a sense of connection for young people, especially today?
So I think it is important to keep in mind that while there are many drawbacks associated with social media and technology, the big benefit, or a huge benefit, is that people can find people that they identify with. And so it is important to remember that you can find that through social media. The challenge that comes, physiologically, human beings are primed to sense rejection. This is from ROTBT, right? The ICAN DBT. And so, we are constantly scanning our environment and are perceiving that we're being rejected all the time. And so on social media, oftentimes if we're seeing a picture of everybody, spending time together without us, we perceive as that as rejection. And it's hard to challenge that when you're seeing it on the screen, right? And then also just, perception is not or our perception is not reality. It doesn't mean it's true. So there's all of those things. And then the concept of quantity over quality and checking boxes versus connectedness. So I think oftentimes technology can reinforce just checking boxes and believing that what they see is really what's happened, was it so much deeper than that. Face-to-face connection physiologically also gives us, different things. And there's many reasons why on kind of neurological, physiological level. But also you can't challenge your perception if you're looking at a screen all the time. You have to ask people sometimes, or, have further conversations with them to really understand that there's more than what you see.
It's a great point. So at a time when youth are especially vulnerable to rejection, they're getting it firsthand through online formats and unable to challenge that by actually having interaction with other people. That's very profound. Ashley?
I think I would just underscore the notion and the value of seeing loneliness is about perception, right? In fact, in the digital world, we may see or feel on the surface that we have a lot of likes, a lot of, friends that we're connected to our social media account. But that does not replace the true, authentic human to human connection and the perception of really feeling seen, valued, connected, and that sense of belongingness. And I think it's that belongingness that is sometimes undermined in online communities. And so I agree that it's not all bad. So it's not something that I think as parents we would want to keep our children from necessarily, but raising awareness about what it can offer and what it can't, and providing opportunities to really build that community where there's a sense of belongingness. And from a kind of social scientist perspective, like what we know from the research is that feeling of belonging is immensely protective against a variety of negative health outcomes. The young adults who feel a sense of community and belongingness are less likely to be depressed, they're less likely to be anxious. And there's a cascade of physical health outcomes that come from that. So that's really the core sense that I think is important in that kind of perception.
Okay. Okay. I definitely agree with both of you on the sense that technology has a really large part on just a sense of belonging. But I also believe that it kind of creates the save for a lot of young people. If you ever heard of the term parasocial, which kind of stems from just watching people online and feeling like you're a part of a certain friend group, or you are very connected to a certain social media platform or streamer, anything like that, it kind of overlays the feeling of loneliness that some youth might be feeling, kind of making you feel like you are a part of something when ultimately you're not. And you need to find a community that gives you that same kind of serotonin boost, but social media kind of covers it up by making you feel like you are, like I said, a part of something that you're not. And it's a really hard thing to get out of, especially in the digital age where most of the youth right now that are in, kindergarten through 12th grade have always grown up with a tablet or a kind phone in their hands. They've always grown up with somebody talking to them on a screen. Might not be their parents or their friends, especially those who kind of went through their adolescent stages during COVID, like talk to a screen. So that kind of makes it even more fake, in a sense. And a lot of people, I don't think, sense that part about the loneliness epidemic, that some people might not even know that they're stuck in it. It's very overlay. It's a really fine line between being lonely and just perceiving that you're a part of something bigger, when ultimately you need to just step out of your comfort zone, outside of the screen, and talk face to face, which are, the physical connection is the realest connection you can ever make. Telling face to face, sharing your real feelings, your real kind of aura about you.
So when I think about this question, I look at it from a caregiver perspective. And we've done a lot of work in programming in a virtual settings. And really what we found out is even though we can be connected everywhere all the time, those connections don't really offer the depth that you need. We also find a lot of times that caregivers really, you're already burned, you're already stressed, you're already kind of pushing, your back's already against the wall. So it's really easy to try to paint a very glamorous picture online of what it looks like to be a caregiver without being really honest about the struggles that you have. And I think where we look at being online, there are so many positive things and so many positive supports out there for caregivers and for the work that they do and for youth. But we really have to look at what is a really emotional depth connection and what is surface level. And then with the understanding when we're looking at caregivers, we have an assumption that, you couldn't come in person because you're busy and stretched thin, and giving care to someone that desperately needs us, we put it on a virtual platform. So click the button and roll or be online with us
without really thinking, we haven't really solved a problem. We haven't really given a solution. It's giving you another way to connect, but we haven't really acknowledged as a caregiver, you're already busy, you're already stretched thin, you're already stressed that day. The person that you're caring for might have had a really bad day. So even online, being able to connect with someone might not be possible for you, and really looking at the resources and supports that you need. And I also think we sometimes in our programming, we've had to address a lot that connection online, this very much can be an illusion. And we feel like we're part of something, or that we can be something that isn't really rooted in services or supports that are available to you in your area. So I think we have to be mindful of positive things, but also be really realistic about what that looks like, and also the people that are trying to engage in those services. Are we really taking a step to provide them something that's helpful? Or are we just adding another layer of difficulty and expecting you to connect a different way because you couldn't connect in person, so connect the light? Well, those things might not be possible either way, because as a caregiver, I'm already at the end of my rope. So now I have another thing to kind of look at and worry about, try to figure out in my day managing that schedule.
So it's very interesting. What I'm hearing is there's sort of this idea of empty calories in, right? This junk food of relationships that seem relevant, or that seem as though they're helping you, but they're not really nurturing you and providing you what you actually be. And for young people and developing children and adolescents, that is their exposure to a lot of relationships. So how do we teach them what a real connection and community looks like?
Well, I think experience, like the experiential, just going out there and putting yourself out there is important. And I think it's really challenging as caregivers and parents. I'm a therapist, and I like to tell people that I thought I knew about parenting until I became the parent myself, right? So it's hard. And I think, we definitely can do children and youth a disservice by not pushing them out of their comfort zone, and just, helping them get out there. And also, I think we ourselves have to model fear of rejection and feeling lonely. We have to talk about our own experience of trying to find people that we connect with, and that it is trial and error. And the more we talk about it, Shane lives in silence. The more we open up and share what it is that we ourselves are going through and have gone through, it can just normalize it and help people understand that you can only experience it through trial and error, through trying to connect with somebody, not vibing, and then finding the next person.
So, I want to ask Jana then, tell me a little bit about what connection and community looks like for you right now.
I think definitely right now I find most of my community, of course, my friends, but also I found a deep sense of significance in my family that I had really connected with or tapped in since I was young. And part of it that's because I'm about to go away to college, and that's very far away. But the other part is just me noticing how much that they poured into me and how they model connection that we're talking about. Because human connection is ultimately a very beautiful and vibrant thing. And that's something that we don't really think about, all of the different languages and emotions and experiences that we share through connection is very important. And watching somebody model that through my family, through my friends, is a very important thing for me. My main connections in my community right now are probably people I meet through my extracurriculars. So I'm very academically inclined. I go to a rigorous school. It's a local school. I go to Brookwood High School, but I went to Brookwood High School. I graduated. But through there, I was in debate, DECA, honor societies, things of that nature. So I was always kind of surrounded by people that shared the same interests as me. And that definitely goes into making meaningful connections, because iron sharpens iron. And anything other than that dulls it or rests it, if that makes sense. So definitely I surround myself with people that think like me. Of course, it's amazing to have diversity of thought. That's always what builds new ideas and allows new connections and just, like I said, ideas to come through. But I could definitely surrounding myself with people that are like me, which means my family, those who think like me, those who have the same perspectives and motives that are on the same track as me is very beneficial just towards my growth and development, communicatively and intellectually.
No wonder you're going so far. You are doing so great in this conversation. So impressive, isn't she? So Ashley, I'm wondering too if there's a sense of a broader understanding of how relationships among adults are changing as well. Is there, you're sort of, and I can relate to this. It's late at night. You really don't want to pick up the phone to call someone. You're just sitting there, scrolling, and you comment on someone else's, and that, again, empty calories in, feels a little bit like making a connection, when in reality, what you're seeking is something very different. Do we have any research on how adult relationships are changing?
We do, and there's more and more now with a historical lens looking back at the infrastructure and institutions and the way that communities were built historically and the way that those spaces lent themselves to kind of a natural community that emerges. And now we have less of that. Our built environment it just does not grow that community as organically as it once did. We are dependent on cars, especially in our area of the state. Our neighborhoods are built so that maybe we have a couple of neighbors that we know, but we have an erosion, really, of some of the institutions and kind of natural ways that people gather, that third space that we may have heard some of the research around third spaces. So you have your home space, your workspace, and that historically people had a third space that might be a religious space, a church, a mosque, that might be a local bar or a pub, that might be a community garden, that might be some other advocacy nonprofit where there's a volunteering happening or service. And that there's really been an arisen of that in the last decade or so. And so what that means is that we have to work even harder to build connections because our natural environments don't organically support it.
There's that book that's reminding me of The Bully Alone.
Yes.
And for those of you who haven't read it, it discusses sort of the premises that society is in a decline because people are no longer going to these third spaces, and they use the example of bowling alleys, which had a massive decline in bowling teams and uses and all that stuff. So definitely worth picking up. So Leslie, to take that to a step of the caregiver's perspective, even if you're a parent with a child as bright as Jada, doing so well, being parent is hard. And challenging yourself to get out there and model the behavior that you want to see might seem a little intimidating. What would you advise to parents?
Yeah, so this is something that we talk about in our program. So we talk about, caregivers, what makes you feel connected? Speaking of the erosion, we had done a lot of research and done a lot of think space around the erosion of that third space. And we oftentimes find baby-based services are the last kind of kicker to where caregivers disappear from and isolate themselves. So we know if you've stopped your faith-based religious services and you attended regularly, we see your caregiving is getting very difficult, and that you are kind of going into what we call the emergency room moment, where you're experiencing burn and stress to a point where you no longer have the ability to give care, or that you're going to care yourself, which is something that we talk about often at the Carter Center and what that looks like. When we talk about connectedness and caregivers, we oftentimes, and please, you can laugh when you say this, I love this activity. We do it with all of our caregivers in our programs, but we have an activity that we do with it called adding fun back into your life, which people, you can roll your eyes too, because caregivers have rolled their eyes at me when I do it too. But what we do is we kind of challenge them. You've stopped doing these things. You stopped being connected. You stop engaging in your community. We know why. You're burnt, you're stressed, you're a caregiver. But what can we do to add that back in? Because you need that. You have to care for yourself in order to care for anybody else. That is baseline. That is the one thing you'll hear me say to all my caregivers endlessly, time and time again. You have to care for yourself. You have to pour into yourself. So we challenge them by asking, one, what was your activity? What was your third space that you loved so much? Why did you feel like you couldn't do it? Now, what does that look like today with your caregiving? Does that look like you have to modify it? So is this an activity that you used to do alone, but now you're caring for someone, so they need to come with you? How can we adjust that activity? Do you have a care team? Who are people that you stepped in so you can be connected and enjoy that activity and be with your peers? And then we oftentimes have to look at another kind of emotion with guilt, is oftentimes you stop doing those third space activities of bowling out and bank-based services because you were caregiving, and that is an honorable journey that you step up to. But oftentimes we feel like we can't have any fun anymore, right? We can't do it. We are caregiving. We cannot have fun anymore. We are serious. I can tell you that both things can be true at the same time. You can caregive and have fun. You can caregive and still be connected. It just might look a little differently. So we might have to sit down and really think this through, what this looks like, who you need in order to succeed in that. And are there things that you can adjust or modify so that the person that you're giving care to, your children, can come along with you and experience this and see you in this different setting? And we oftentimes talk about care, people that receive care sometimes feel really guilty about the burden that they cause, right? Yeah. In our military programs, a lot of our veterans have said, well, I feel so guilty because now I need care. And how hard is that? My wife is a mother to 4 kids, and I have a TBI, PTSD, and I can't go outside anymore. So now she has to sit with me, and that feels really unfair. So we oftentimes have to look at, well, we can all do all of these things at the same time, and we don't have to feel guilty about it. It just might look a little differently. We might not be able to do that activity alone, but we could come and model that and show you what it looks like when we have fun and when we enjoy ourselves, when we're filling up our cup, and what that does on the offset when we go back to try to give care. Those care recipients have a really positive experience because their caregivers are lighter. They feel more hopeful about the future. They've gone out and seen the sunshine and touched grass. They had some fun and maybe a laugh, but they also done something for themselves that they more than likely had not done in years. And that's the goal. What's the one thing you could do? And it can be as simple and small as read a chapter of a book. I will tell her how to write her, and her adding fun back into her life challenge was to write a poem. A very simple 5-line poem, doesn't have to be big. And so she spent 30 minutes doing it, and it was so much fun. She kept doing it, and she would write about little things about her day, which then turned into chapters of a book, and then walks to listen to a book. And then her care recipient came along with her, and then they started writing together. So it became an activity that they both could do that was fun and engaging, that they connected with other people with.
So I think that's great. I mean, I think the take-home message there is that you don't have to start very big. It could be putting something back in your life that as an adult you have let go of because you don't feel you have time. It could be something as simple as making sure you're creating little moments for your connecting with yourself and a relationship with yourself. First, maybe that's getting into more therapy conversation than we have time for today, but really recognizing that it doesn't take a whole lot to get back out there into a situation that allows you to create those physiological responses that come with human connection and the personal sense of meaning. I want to go back to something that was said a little bit early that Ashley touched on and Jada touched on as well, is the sense of purpose and meaning. Caregivers certainly have that to an nth degree, but we know there's a lot of research as well around the sense of meaning and purpose in life, particularly around young men and what that might mean for how they feel about themselves and their likeliness of having depression or anxiety. And I wondered, Ashley, if you would talk about how a sense of community and connection can help develop that.
Or is there research in that area? There is. And part of that, some really interesting research now around other protective factors for young adults as they move into adulthood. that I find really interesting related to purpose and belongingness is the role that awe and spirituality play in mental health and well-being. So cultivating opportunities for awe, see things that you can recognize as amazing or interesting, or even something small like noticing a baby bird emerging from a nest, right, in the spring. So helping young adults look at the world through that lens of awe, and also the protective effects of having a spiritual sense of self. For some young adults, they may find belonging in community in a formal religious community. Others may not. Spirituality is bigger than just religion for some people, for many people. And so what we've seen in the research is that young adults and adults who have some sense of spirituality, some spiritual selfhood, and our ability as parents to cultivate that in some way, shape, or form, we know is directly associated with mental health or well-being as they become adults. And I think a big part of that is belongingness.
Belongingness. So let's go back to identifying when we might be feeling lonely. Certainly, you could be sitting by yourself at the lunch table in high school, and no one is sitting with you, and that can feel rejection and lonely all over. Or as an adult, you could be watching a bunch of people walk by, and they're all having a great time at the park, and you're sitting there by yourself reading a book, and maybe you feel lonely in that moment. But there's a deeper, that's a momentary thing. It's not necessarily an indication that there's a deeper problem. How do we know the difference?
So one of the emotions that a lot of young people and adults describe when they have like this ongoing feeling of loneliness and depression is feeling numb. Feeling, even if you've accomplished this thing, you don't feel it. You don't feel good about it. And that comes, I think, from that existential just feeling of disconnectedness. So that is one indicator, is that feeling overall numb and not finding joy in things that you were hoping for and have accomplished.
So if a child, comes to their parent and they seem a little off, what kind of questions could the parent ask the child to identify that? Maybe they don't have the vocabulary to say that they're feeling numb, or maybe they don't identify with that word particularly. How would you pull that out to identify that loneliness might be the problem?
I think, being able to ask the child, what are they feeling happy about or enjoying, if anything? What are their goals? Are they enjoying the things that they used to enjoy? I think it's an important question. And, do they feel like they're missing out on anything? Those are types of questions that they could ask.
And Jada, how do communities and relationships work for people we're asking you to represent everyone your age. But in your experience, when you notice a friend is a little off, do the folks gather around? How does that work in your community? What are you guys looking for? Because your generation is most likely to talk about their mental health concerns and to be most aware of mental health concerns.
Well, in my community, which is a bit paradoxical to what you just said, I think it's very common to keep everything under wraps. Most definitely, I think that my generation is very outspoken about mental health, but that does not mean that they are outspoken about their own. It's very important to kind of realize, like I said, kind of being parasocial, and dealing with other people's problems, dealing with everything else but your own. That's a very large part. in my generation particularly, I've seen that in a lot of people where they are so concerned about the well-being of their friends and their teachers, even their parents, their families, their jobs, their financial status, and they leave themselves for very lax. I had a friend who had a problem with vaping, and I was telling her, I was like, that's bad for you. And she was like, oh yes, then I would tell any other friend to quit because I care about the one. And that kind of opened my eyes up to just the general thought process of that, of not putting yourself first in those kinds of conditions. Well, that was her physical health, but that could also correlate to her mental health and how she feels by herself. And being lonely again, the fine generation, I don't think a lot of people realize that they're lonely. It's usually just kind of you're in a community, but already really connected to your community. If you really think about it hard enough, do you know what your friend's parents do? Do you know where your friend lives? Or do you know what they're involved in? Or do they know what you're involved in? Your spirit, your aspirations, things of that nature. So being in a community, in my perspective, we really care about the mental health, yes. But our mental health is always left on the back foot compared to everyone else's.
That's such an interesting insight. I think, what can we do and to help you be more vulnerable in those situations, or even accepting of the discomfort that comes with saying, I don't feel like I belong?
Yeah, I think definitely, especially in spaces where it's not as open, say a very tight-knit group or a very rigorous class, a very combative and competitive class. People are not as open to share their misdemeanors because it seems like somebody can always get a leg up with you, in my experience. So I think definitely opening up those spaces to be able to communicate with people that you feel comfortable with. Because a lot of times we don't really feel comfortable with people that we're around. We're just around them because they share our interests or they are trying to reach the same thing that we are trying to reach. So we kind of just place them in a group that we're not really deeply connected with. So definitely, I think as parents and mentors, it's important to not build your child's community, but like I said before, iron sharpens iron. So make sure that your child is kind of making connections outside of their ultimate aspiration. Making sure that if your child is really into tech or engineering or STEM, they have some artsy friends, some writer friends, some people that are into literature that can kind of round them out, so they're able to see a deeper side of themselves than just their future or how much money they need to make or hit jobs and things of that nature. So definitely opening up spaces for your child to kind of get out of their comfort zone, whether that be, academic, sports, anything of that nature, or like what I'm doing, advocacy. It's an amazing opportunity, and I love doing panels and speaking, but it's not the only side of me. I have a lot more that I love to do. I love connecting people. I like writing. I like environmental stuff. I like planting. And that's the other side of me that I need to cater to as well in order to kind of help fill my cup, like you were saying, and in order myself to not kind of shelter all the way down to just this part of my soul.
Again, some wonderful insights there. It can be very easy, I think, for people who are very busy as young people or caregivers and parents are caregivers, to have a perceived singular identity, right? I am first this, and then maybe these other things. So how do we help people, Leslie, refine those other sides of their personality? And how do we help them feel okay with being more of it?
So I think when we look at caregiving, that's something we have to challenge a lot. We have to challenge that you're not just a caregiver, because when we look at the world through that very type singular lens, that perspective really does fall down to this very tiny circle, which then makes us feel less connected to the world around us. We talk a lot in our programs about how caregiving is just one identity to you. It's a journey that you're on. It's not the only journey that you're on. We look at caregiving as oftentimes I've taken up this role, and this is the role I have, and this is what I'm known as. I'm this person's caregiver, which is really interesting because then we also find on the flip side that a lot of times caregivers don't self-identify. So when we're looking at connection and we're looking at social spaces and resources and supports, you have to identify as that. You have to say, yes, I'm taking care of someone. So it's a weird dynamic that we work within. I say when we look at caregivers, like when we do our activities, adding fun back into your life, you're not just a caregiver. You like to write, you like to read, you like to do advocacy work, you like to do all of these things. You're not just one singular person. So how can we get you to step out of that and then see the world around you? So we do a lot of challenging activities and a lot of challenging your narratives. When we look at caregiving, at that be your only focus. You start out your story as a caregiver. No. How did you get here? What is the story? Where did it come from? You have more to you than just this one story. It's an amazing story. It's an amazing journey. But there's a whole other world that makes that possible, that makes you who you are. So challenge your assumptions.
So that seems like that would be a very protective thing for young people, wouldn't it? Because if you maybe aren't as accepted in one group, you might be more accepted in another group, and you can embrace that part of your identity. How do we do that with kids?
Well, one of the things that we do on our in our LGBT group on campus here is the whole group is not curriculum. We actually have like 15 minutes in the beginning where we all like eat something and drink something, and we like chat and make small talk. And then the last part is saying goodbye. So I think, just building in downtime, which is really uncomfortable. Like some of the kids, when they first come in, they're like, wait, what are we doing? Where's my worksheet? Where's my eye? Yeah, like that ball. Yeah, we've done it separately. So this it's uncomfortable, and it's the opportunity to connect and be spontaneous and tease each other. That's another thing. We encourage the kids to tease us as we're facilitators. It's teasing is fun and goofy and silly, and it connects, and it's pro-silly.
So I love that. So creating downtime for people to have moments where they do have to test the waters with other friend groups, sit around and wait for something to happen, maybe at a religious function or at school, and talk. That sounds really basic, doesn't it? Giving kids time to sit around and talk to each other. And I'm sure among the adolescents, that's especially attractive. I have to talk to you. So the teasing sounds like it's a great idea. But also being able to, and this is one area where we know social media does help, being able to identify the things about you and learn more about them that are interesting to you, right? Like if you have a super geek interest, like I do, or like my husband does, we can find more about it online. And youth today are more accepting of letting your geek flag fly, right? So going to you, Ashley, what does the research say about building resilience for rejection?
Well, there's more out there than what I can describe right now. We're learning more and more about that. I think one thing that our research is focusing on right now is around mindfulness, which is like mindfulness practices have really kind of hit pop culture in the last decade. But we're working around teaching people mindfulness strategies, and all that means is a present moment, non-judgmental focus, right? And that many a times mindfulness is something that you would think like, I just do that by myself. What could that possibly have to do with loneliness, right? But what we know is that when you practice mindfulness, which is to say that you are learning some skills around staying in the present moment and kind of increasing your distress tolerance, sitting with your feeling, learning to name
how you're thinking, what you're feeling without judgment, and instead with curiosity, will help individuals then be more resilient in social interactions because you're building that muscle around sitting with discomfort. And I think with young adults, that is, and adults, I can speak for myself too, that is a muscle that takes constant work to strengthen, especially today's digitally connected world where many of us are afraid, have social anxiety, are afraid of rejection. So there's this kind of cognitive distortion where we're already worried, anticipatory worry about what will happen if we engage face to face with someone. We might get rejected. Remember the last time we did that? That didn't go well. Mindfulness practice helps us sit with the present moment, not worry about what's already happened, not anticipate something that will happen in the future, but really sit with that discomfort, acknowledgement in a non-judgmental way, and take that first step. And that's that important proponent around building strength and resilience around the discomfort that comes with engaging with other people.
Embrace the cringe, right? I know we're a little bit running behind. I do want to open the floor to just a couple of questions, but panelists. Come on, there you go. Back. So the question for those who can't hear online, what are some reasons to be hopeful when the world seems like it's moving in kind of a dark and isolated direction? This is for all of you.
I think you have to kind of like collect hopeful moments, you know. I'm thinking of, again, something that happened in our program, you know, like little groups where the kids are cooking and like having a good time, just like hanging out and chatting. You know, I think it's so important to kind of like just try to notice them. Notice those little moments as much as possible, those moments of connection and downtime. And when you can, like try to build them into your life. And then also telling yourself that all it takes is one other person for somebody you feel connected. It's a really, really low bar. And, you know, connection means going a level deeper than you already are. It doesn't even have to be like, you know, this profound thing. It's literally going one level deeper with one other person, and that starts to build connection. One thing at a like larger national and international level that makes me feel really hopeful is you mentioned for Professor Surgeon General Vivek Murthy's call to action around naming loneliness as a public health crisis. That statement from him many years ago then set the stage for the National Institutes of Health and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention to fund multiple research centers across the country, of which Georgia State University is one, to study loneliness and to develop interventions at the community level to address this issue. So there has been a national response. There has been money put into research centers to build programs, that infrastructure. The UK is doing a lot, Scandinavian countries are doing a lot. So there's a movement here around this issue. And what there's just talk, that's one thing, but there's money going to do to handle this issue at a national and international level. So like as a scientist and researcher, back is BO because it shows me that this is being seen as a priority.
It gives you hope too.
Me personally, I was given the opportunity last summer to take a 5-day trip to Belize. And there was a service trip with an organization called the Web Leadership Alliance. And there I met a woman named Mary. She lived in a community called Bluffing Ridges, which was basically, it was 3 miles long, raised up on planks and kind of like wood, think of like wooden holes. And all of their houses were made of basically kind of scrap metal. And some of the backs of them are open, covered by maybe like plastic or kind of like tarp, things like that. So I was there delivering groceries on some of my cowork, and I met this woman named Barry. She was just a couple years older than me. She was maybe 24, 23, but she had 2 kids. And she was a single mother, working, living, trying to make enough for to send her oldest daughter, who was up to 5, to primary school. And as we talked, even though we lived in completely different hemispheres of the world, I was able to connect with her on such a deep level. Even though she was, like I said, she lived in Belize, she spoke a different language than me, so we had a little bit of a barrier. But I was able to connect with her, and that was one thing that's kind of changed my perspective on just the world in general. The fact that I was able to connect with this woman that I've only known for maybe 30 minutes, who lives in a completely different country. I did not plan to see you. I just walked into your house and you let me in. You let me hold your baby. Like, okay, that's amazing. But one thing that she said to me was she was just very vulnerable. She told me that she does at times feel lonely. She kind of strayed away from her church, which was her community, because she was caring for her 2 young children, which is kind of from your perspective. And her husband or her husband walked away from her. So she agreed on the fact that yes, she does at times feel lonely, but her children give her comfort. Her sister that comes and visits her gives her comfort. So definitely, I want to say, the 2 points I'm trying to make with this is that there's connection all around the world, wherever you can find it, littered with whatever crack, cranny, nook you can look in. There is a connection that you can flourish from, grow from. And there's already a connection within you with your blood, your family, especially your children, your mother, father, sister, brother. I have a really deep connection to my family, and I always find solace in them. So literally, it's inside of you and all around you, and that's what gives me hope with just the loneliness epidemic in this world, is knowing that I'm able to talk and communicate and share my experiences and learn from people that are both young and old.
Tell that to Paul.
If I know, I should not have sat in the last chair. Yay. So when we look at caregiving and caregivers, and I am a caregiver myself, we talk about hope a lot, because if you feel hopeful, the journey feels like you can do it. This is something you can go on. We oftentimes have to recenter our thinking as caregivers, and we have to look at it. Well, hope doesn't have to be a big grand thing. Sometimes we think it is world peace, or we live in world hunger, or it's, sunshine and rainbows and look at us and we're all doing good. That's not necessarily the case. And when we talk to caregivers, when we look at caregivers, sometimes it's very small things that we have to point out. Well, that's really exciting and fun. You got to eat a full meal while you were sitting down at a dinner table. That's really exciting, because you haven't been able to do that much. Your person that you're caring for is now back on a regular schedule, so your days and nights are not mixed up and you're not operating on the alternate schedule. That's really good. So now you can go and connect more with other people in the daytime hours. How fun is that? So we do a lot with challenging, what do you think hope looks like, and how can we make hope seem attainable and something that can fit in the palm of your hand, or it can be big and grandiose, but we can start small. We also do a lot in our programming and with our caregivers, because the world can be very doom and gloomy, and we're all connected all the time to this news cycle that never ends. We oftentimes talk about when world events get troubling and they trigger us, and they make us go down a spiral in a really unhealthy thinking pattern and isolate ourselves. And so we challenge a lot of times our caregivers to have a limit on that news cycle. What time are you watching that news cycle? And when that time is up, you turn it off, and that's your challenge. And then we ask them to track. You turned off the news cycle at that time. You did your 30 minutes. You got what you need. You turned it off. Now track that through the week and tell me what your stress is, what your hopefulness is. Were you able to feel like you were connecting better with people not in a digital world, or in a digital world if you're on online support first? What does that look like, and how did that feel? So we always challenge to track those emotions once you put something into place. So just a practical thing. turn the TV off, set a time limit, and then track how it makes you feel throughout the week and what that food was that you found in that.
Maybe go talk to someone about what you saw on TV in real life. Go talk to real life. Well, we've come to the end of our discussion. I want to thank all the panelists for their generous time, their thoughtful advice and guidance and wisdom for us. We want to wish Data all the best. I'm going to be sure to be a very bright future for her. And just remember that you have all the tools inherently, as Jada said, to connect with other people. It's all about exercising the muscles of getting used to being in a little discomfort, facing maybe rejection every once in a while, but trying to find the longing that will help you feel more fulfilled, more connected, and more inspired in your day. Thank you for joining us today.